This is a podcast about one woman's mission to help entrepreneurs and business owners write better business books. Each week, we tackle your writing excuses, because there are excuses too, and help you beat the blank page of doom so that you can write the book that'll grow your life and your business. Now here's your host, Vicky Fraser.
Hello and welcome to the 1000 Authors Show. My name's Vicky, and this week I've replaced my husband with the lovely and beautiful and wonderful Helen Blakeman from Heroic Books, which is really, really exciting. Helen, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Vicky.
Oh,
good to be here.
Yes, on this beautiful day as well. I have no idea what the weather's going to be like when this actually goes out. So imagine it's 25 degrees and it will be fab. I always ask, I totally forgot to give you a heads up at the beginning of this call before we came on. I always ask my guests what they're reading at the moment. So what book are you reading at the moment?
I am reading about 4 different books, and they are manuscripts that have been sent to us at Heroic Books recently. So there's one in particular with an author that we've just signed that I'm now reading the end of. And then I'm also reading 2 other books, because I am a screenwriter. So I'm reading 2 books that I am currently adapting into children's international animation series. So I'm reading for work all the time, and I'm reading for pleasure. Well, it is pleasure, but there isn't a leisure book that is on the go right now.
Okay, cool. Right, I'm going to circle back around to Heroic Books in a minute, because you've just reminded me that you're also a screenwriter. So I'm like, which one do we talk about first? You know what? Tell us about Heroic Books first, and then I'm going to ask you about your screenwriting, because that's really, really interesting. So tell us about Heroic Books.
Okay. Well, Heroic Books was born out of the fact that I am a screenwriter, but Heroic Books is a fantasy fiction publisher. And we are also a content production company as well, which, of course, goes back to my screenwriting skills. So, yes, we are about to open, excitingly, our submissions window for August for fantasy fiction submissions. And I say fantasy fiction in the broadest of terms because, of course, we cut across sci-fi and epic fantasy and everything in between. And it's a wonderful genre. It's so imaginative. I think it works best when there is some kind of allegory with the real world somehow. In these times particularly, it allows us to escape and engage with other realms and what's currently not to love about that.
Yeah,
it's also a really visual genre, which I think is great for training that kind of inner mind muscle of pictures. But Heroic are also looking to work with illustrators whose artwork will, of course, enhance our authors, and it will enable us to create digital content. That's what we really want to do moving forward, is bring, fantasy fiction publishing into the digital age.
Yeah.
It's obviously audiobooks are an amazing and fast growing market, but there are pictures to be had out there as well. I think it'd be nice to combine all 3 things.
Yeah, and I think there's loads of opportunities to do so as well, because like you say, fantasy and sci-fi is such a richly visual, even if you don't have the beautiful illustrations that people often do, it paints a picture in your mind, especially if the writer is good enough to do that, and I'm sure the ones that you work with are. And before we move on, I should probably explain why I've asked you to come on the podcast, because obviously I'm like non-fiction indie publishing, and that's what I help people do. I help people to write business books and non-fiction books. And you over there, Heroic Books, are, like you say, fantasy and sci-fi fiction. And the reason that we connected, just for my listeners' benefit, is because you'd seen me post on LinkedIn, hadn't you, about how much I love Terry Pratchett.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I really like the way that you wrote that post and the way you write other posts, because they seem to me as though they have a narrative. And I saw your posts and I engaged with them. And so I contacted you, which is always a good lesson for everybody, is to be proactive.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think as a writer, you get so stuck in your own head that it's almost at times to the detriment of your creativity or your marketability. And the more that we connect and the more that we create, the more that we create.
Yeah. I know, it's funny. It's like an addictive, self-fulfilling, wonderful circle of amazingness.
It truly is that, yeah. And the more that things get attracted to you, and you know, and the more links you make. I mean, I think that the reason why I actually saw your LinkedIn was that we had both been at Birmingham University at different times. But it's that algorithm thing of, you know, you were sent and I responded, and here we are today.
I know, and it's great. And this is like a general message for anybody. It's like, put your personality into what you are doing, into your marketing, because you never know what is going to come out. And now, you know, Helen and I have met and we've been talking about all kinds of really exciting things. But part of the reason I wanted you on the show today is because my specialty is indie publishing. That's what I know about. I don't know so much about the trad publishing industry. And even though you're fiction and most of my people are non-fiction, it's going to be really useful, I think, to hear about how you've set up your publishing agency and how it works and what you want to achieve with it and who you're working with. So can you just tell us all that? No, I'll start at the beginning. So how did you come to set up the agency in the first place, and what are you hoping to do with it?
We set up the company. Chris and I met, Chris Arnold, who's the co-founder of Heroic, along with myself. We met at the beginning of this year, although we lived a mile apart as children, and my mum knows his mum. We didn't actually know each other. And Chris has an absolute love for the fantasy fiction genre and has always wanted to write. And he, through his passion for the genre, he'd started to research the publishing industry, and he felt that, you know, publishing needed to be pushed forth into the digital age. And with me as a writer, I also felt as though writers needed to be treated better in terms of their talent development from the start by a publisher. And what I mean by that is that, you know, traditionally publishers don't accept open submissions. Usually it's through an agent. And that's a numbers game, basically, because they may well be inundated. But also, you know, you can submit a manuscript and you'll wait 3 months and then you'll get a letter back, maybe, that says yes, or primarily it will inevitably say no, again, a numbers game. And then what happens? You go to the next one and the next one, the next one. And at no stage is you might get a few headline notes, but at no stage is the writer at the center of this. At no stage is the writer given direction. And we want to change that, because I understand how it is to write. I understand the psychology of it, because that's obviously been my career so far. So it's about building respect for both the writer and the work. And, you know, through our submissions window, you can choose which path you want to go down in terms of your route. And you can choose which level of feedback you want to have from us. And it's not just in terms of developmental feedback, which is obviously the main point that we want to concentrate on, but you can also choose an author's readiness appraisal, which is a 30-point all-around assessment of what you have surrounding you at that, you know, at the current time. And dependent on the outcomes of our appraisals and our review of the manuscript, and of the, you know, the dependent on the section that we've assessed, we're then able to offer development pathways on top of that. Because often when an author submits a manuscript, the manuscript isn't ready and the author isn't ready either. And by that, I mean in terms of their marketability.
Right.
You know, we can fix the manuscript, they can do work, and we can go through a developmental edit of that. But there's everything else that goes around it. And I know as a writer, I find it difficult to self-publicize, because your head is in the book. Obviously it is. Your head is in your project, which is exactly where it should be. Mm-hmm. So it kind of takes an outside source and support to be able to enhance your marketability, and, you know, to advise on your social media, to advise on your website, and all of the surrounding things that a writer shouldn't have to put their energy into. And that's where we come in being able to assess these add-ons, if you like, to your actual IP, to enhance your IP and to enhance your visibility and to enhance your sales, and actually to boost your creativity, to keep on writing and believing. And I know for me, the more support I have around me and the more acknowledgement I have in positive terms of me as a writer, the more I am able to create, which is what I said earlier, that creating makes creativity. And as do conversations.
Yeah. I think that's really, really exciting, because I think every now and then I do get somebody like that comes to me and says, oh, how do I get traditionally published and all the rest of it? And I'm kind of like, well, that's not my area of expertise, but you've really got to think about what's best for you. And so it's really great to have someone come on and talk about what you're doing, because like you said, traditionally it's not been like, I love traditional publishers, they're great, they're fine, but like you say, they have a business model, they're working for a business model, and quite often they don't put the writer front and center. And it's, the lack of feedback thing is something that's always driven me absolutely around the bend, because it's like, how can you expect to get better if you don't get the feedback?
Exactly that, and even with, in terms of what we're looking to do with writers as they move along their development path, we don't want, if we were a vanity press, we could say to anybody, oh yeah, we'll publish you, because anybody can self-publish these days. But if you're not ready, the book will languish, the author will be demoralized, and the quality of the brand will be diminished. Yeah. So what we want to do is help writers to achieve a standard that means that the market and the consumer, the reader, is ready for them and will engage. And actually, authors are a brand by themselves, and I don't mean that glibly. I'm not talking about celebrity authors, but they are, and we want to help authors be ready for that. And for those authors that we think have the potential, we will be offering them a publishing deal when they are ready. Some will be ready from the start, absolutely within our submissions. We've had, prior to our submissions window being open, we have had some manuscripts sent directly to us from contacts, and one of them was, absolute a nugget of gold, and we have signed that author. But they still need development, and we are still doing that before we will launch the book. But we want to help authors grow, and so if they reach the standard that when we will publish, that's absolutely fine. But if they reach a standard that they are happy with and then say, oh, I want to go elsewhere, then that's also fine, because it's their work, their choice, their pathway. But we will aid them in reaching a standard.
So that's really interesting. Yeah, no, I mean, that sounds great. And I'm going to ask you for a few more details in a minute. But I think that's one of the things that I really like, because I think a lot of people don't realize that, especially with the traditional publishers, like the bigger traditional publishers, that you lose control over your property, and it's no longer under your control, and it's all down to them. And, getting control back can be very, very difficult. And so I really like the fact that you're putting the writer front and center, and, that they retain control of their property, and that's how it works. So can you tell us a bit about how because you mentioned different packages and different pathways. Tell us a little bit about how you work with authors and what choices they've got.
Well, in terms of the initial submissions, they have a choice where we can read up to 10,000 of words of theirs. That is an absolutely free pathway, and they will get the traditional reply within 3 months. And then there are 3 other pathways, going up in scale, so that we can read some of their words and get one of our trained readers to provide a really vibrant review of their work. And then the next 2 steps are, we can provide that review along with our author readiness appraisal, and they go up in stages as to how many words they read. And of course, at that point, yes, the authors are retaining their power over their words. Obviously, as we go forward, and if we were traditionally publish them, then there is a contract, as is with any other publishing route that you take. But in terms of the developmental packages moving forward, again, it goes along the same path. You know, there would be a more peer review style developmental package where authors who would fit together would be, you know, put into a team and do a peer project as they go along, which would be designed by us. And then the other options would be more bespoke and more in depth. So we're trying to appeal to both skills and to budgets.
Yeah. And I think that's great, because I think one of the things that obviously people worry about when they're indie publishing and self-publishing is that, you know, there are going to be, you take all the risk as the writer, you take all the risk and you do all the investment. And traditional publishing is entirely the other way. It's like, you know, you don't have as much control, but they take all the risk. And so it sounds to me like you're kind of filling that gap almost with lots of options for people.
Yeah, absolutely, because not every author is going to be ready. And when certainly, you know, in this entirely risky world right now, you know, you can't gamble on every manuscript that you like.
No.
So if you work as a team to say we can get this to the best of its ability, you know, my philosophy in terms of notes, and by goodness, you know, I that's my bag, you know, I get notes on projects every day, is don't get bitter, get better.
Yes.
And that's what you have to do as a writer. Sometimes you have to think, oh, maybe that choice wasn't the best choice, and it may have been the best choice at the time and the only choice that you had within your head, or whatever it is that goes on between the synapses of thought and the ends of the fingertips onto the laptop or onto the page. But it's great to be pushed. Mm-hmm. And when you have a set of eyes who, you know, that are supportive and that want to make you better, and there will be painful jabs along the way. I mean, when I get a notes email on any project that I've written, I always say that I open it with like one eye shut. You know, you kind of going, oh no, it's my notes, and I know how it hurts. Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing, is that I understand the psychology behind it, and I understand why notes are given. And I hope that the writers who come to us understand that these notes aren't about them. That's where writers have to. That's where you have to get to. They're about making your, I don't want to say product because that sounds like a business transaction, but making your creativity better. It's about pushing it, and sometimes everybody needs to be pushed. You know, you're a mentor, Vicky. You know what you do in your programs. You know how us humans need to have that little extra push in order to achieve. You know, it's like getting out of bed to go for a jog. It's the easiest thing is to stay in bed. The easiest thing is not to get notes. The easiest thing is not to do the notes. But what makes you feel better, and what makes the novel better at the end of it? And that's the pathway that we want to tread with our authors. Yeah,
and it's a difference between, you know, a mediocre or a good author and a really great author. It's like that, I think, is that willingness to be better and not to. So even though it's scary, because I'm a writer as well, I know how painful it can be. It's like there's also a certain. It's not just fear. There's a certain level of arrogance there as well. That like, oh, I've made this thing, and you know, it's my thing, and I don't want notes on it because it can't possibly be any better. And it's like, well, everything can be better. And so it's really, your thing sounds great. So what advice would you give to somebody who would like to submit a book to you? What's the best place to start? What do they need?
Well, the best place to start is to go to our website. Our submissions will be open in August, so it's www.heroicbooks.com. You can find us on Twitter at Heroic Books, and on Instagram the same. And you can find out more about us and about what we do there. I would say, you know, obviously it's best if you've written. It's obviously best if you've written something in the fantasy genre, and tell us about yourselves. If you have a synopsis, there is you know, you can upload that as well. And yeah, tread the journey together is what we hope. So if people are ready for that and are ready to be developed and want that and have the ambition for that, then we absolutely want to hear from them. We are a very ambitious company, and I'll kind of seg into my screenwriting background now, because as well as Heroic Books being a publisher, we are also a content production company. So we would like our authors to be able to, cross over into TV and into games. So, if we feel their book is something worthy of us putting forward to a game studio, then we would help create a pitch deck for that. And in terms the same with TV and animation and movies. And this week we've just optioned from another publisher a children's fantasy adventure book, which we are developing as an international children's TV animation series. Yeah, it's really exciting. We're going out to got some calls next week with some very major global studios who are interested, because I'm a BAFTA and International Emmy Award winning screenwriter, and I'm the showrunner of BBC's Hetty Feather, and amongst other things. And I've also just written and executive produced again a children's animation series for Zealam Animation in Paris, and they are an Oscar nominated animation company. So my background as a writer and as a producer and as a creative is something that I want to bring and encourage our writers to see that they have the possibility to follow that journey as well.
That's really exciting. I don't think a lot of first-time writers certainly would even think about that being, a possibility or an option. And I just think that's so cool.
Well, when people have really original IP and ideas, it's a case of knowing where to take it. And thankfully, we have a brilliant advisory board at Heroic who are very well connected within the TV, film and game world, who we have readily available connections with. I'm also the chair of the Children's BAFTA Committee. So again, within the world of film, TV and game, the market is there. And also the appetite right now is there, especially with fantasy, when you've got, I think, the new Netflix series Cursed is globally #1 right now. Yeah. Obviously the success of The Witcher and of Game of Thrones, and also the appetite for animated content in the post-COVID world. As a writer who, I've been, as well as being the co-founder of Heroic Books, I've also been writing an animation series as well this year. So that is something that really brought it home to me, that when the pandemic struck, that this is a business and this is an area which can continue to grow and operate within kind of the lockdown world. And also everybody needs an escape from that, and fantasy fiction is a route. So animation, thankfully, can continue remotely. Yeah. Thanks to the wonders of the artists and designers involved. And the same with the games industry. So whereas a lot of TV live action and movie live action sets shut down and a lot of projects were shelved and on hold, the world of animation and gaming is able to continue. Yeah. And as is, of course, the world of authors. Yeah. Yeah, it's been an amazing time for writing and reading. Absolutely. And lockdown actually was a really productive time, because there were no more excuses, were there, Vicky? There weren't, no. And I think, I think it's been funny, because some people have I've had the absolute rage with some people that I've been like, oh, I'm really bored all over Facebook. And I'm like, I'm running a business, shut up, I've never been busier, kind of thing. And then there's other people who have been so busy because they've been juggling their kids and homeworking, and I'm in awe of those people, because I can't even imagine how they're getting everything. It's been such a funny time. And then other people have had time to write and space to write, and that's been great for them. And I know that I've had a bunch of people, get in touch the last few weeks, be like, oh, I'm ready to write my book, which is fantastic, because, they've been thinking about it, I guess, for the last few months where we've been locked down. So yeah, this is very exciting. And you're going to come back at some point and tell us more, because I know that you've got this big launch. And so I'm hoping that things will change for you in a fantastic way. Absolutely. We'll keep in touch. And, I know I'm intrigued and I admire your determination for the authors that you work with. I think that what you do in terms of the discipline that you bring in terms of the writing process, we all need discipline. We all need to turn up, which is the first thing. We all need to read, and we also need, obviously, to write. And I really like that approach.
Yeah.
I always think of it as, will you feel better if you do it? The answer is yes. Inevitably. And that's what we want to do with our authors at Heroic as well, is help them find that joy and the creativity and the productivity level and the appreciation of themselves and of their work and of the genre. And so, if anybody has their fantasy fiction novel that they've not as yet submitted to a publisher, or rather if they've not signed to a publisher, then absolutely send it to us, and we'll be open from August at heroicbooks.com.
By the time this podcast goes up, people will be able to go to heroicbooks.com and find out about getting their book published with you, which is super exciting.
Absolutely, and as we say, it's we want to make fantasy reality, and it is making, fantasy authors making their reality be a heroic author, be a writer, be sold, be known, be appreciated. And we think that's the way forward.
I think so too. I always ask my guests to leave us with just a quick takeaway. So if you could only give one piece of advice to an aspiring author, what would it be?
It would be to read. And read the people that you admire, read your peers' work, and most importantly, read your work again and again and again, and maybe have somebody else read it too, and that can be a trusted friend or family member, or an editor that you work with. And also you can read your work and then put it aside for a little bit, even if it's a day, and then read it again, and inevitably some things will come to you, or you'll spot that typo that your eyes didn't see the first time, which is always my mistake. Read again, and then write.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So if you are writing a fantasy or sci-fi book and you want to get published by an amazing new publishing house, go to heroicbooks.com and find out all about it. Get in touch with Helen and Chris, and hopefully we'll see your name in print soon. Helen, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Vicky. Pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. And next week, Jo will be back. We will be rambling on about the writing, self-publishing and business process. And in the meantime, if you enjoyed this podcast, please go and rate us 5 stars or however many stars you think we deserve. If it's 1 star, there are other podcasts available. Leave us a review, because we love that, and we will read out your review as well. And if you have listened to every single episode, drop me an email, vicky@vickyfraser.com, because I will send you something silly in the post. You can send me an email with your postal address. I will send you something in the post to say thank you. And in the meantime, happy writing.
Thanks for listening. You can find links and show notes on the website at moxiebooks.co.uk/podcast, where you can also sign up for the best daily emails in the multiverse and find loads of free resources to help you write your book. We'll be back the same time next week with more tales from the book writing trenches and the latest on what the tiny sheeps have been up to.